Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, aka your insider on The Outsider, and this episode we're breaking down the 5th entry in the season. HBO must have got spooked by Superbowl Sunday, so they've dropped the episode early, and throughout this video we're going to be going through the new entry and what happens in it. There will be heavy spoilers here, so if you don't want anything potentially ruined, then I highly recommend that you turn off now. We will be talking about certain elements of the book, as per usual, so if you don't want anything spoiled about the future of the show, then it's time to leave the video. If you're still here, I just want to give a huge thank you for sticking around. Now let's get into our breakdown of The Outsider. Episode 5 opens in the midst of a shootout between a lone gunman and the police. Similar to Jack, we can see on the back of his neck that he has a huge rash. We cut to the character 3 days prior and see him holed up in a home that has child killer written in graffiti on the outside. It turns out that this is Heath Hofstede's household, the apparent child killer who we saw die in prison in episode 3. We see the character making Heath's bed, and this act of remorse is purely driven by guilt. It's revealed that he was working with the Outsider, was complicit in the killing of the children, and helped to frame Heath for the crimes after his airtight alibi. The Outsider needs an accomplice in order to operate, and we learn that this was his at the previous town. As we know, the Outsider is manipulating Jack currently and completely warping his mind by tormenting him. This has sent him off the deep end, and he's started slowly descending into madness. If you've been keeping up to date with the recap so far, then you'll know that we've discussed how the Outsider is similar to a vampire, and in Jack he is found as Jonathan Harker. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, Harker ended up falling under a sort of spell from the titular character, and this servitude that he fell into saw him eating bugs and almost worshipping Dracula as a deity. Here we see Jack following a similar sort of routine and building a home for the character in the woods. Like Harker, he sort of turns against his master, but the way that he operates gives us a good idea of how the Outsider does too. Because of this, we now have a pattern of behaviour for the antagonist of the show, and from the way that the Outsider works, we can tell it tends to show up to a town, take blood from a local, through this blood change its DNA to match their appearance, feed upon a child, frame the person they're now imitating, and then lie low in the area, feeding upon the grief of the families that are caught up in the tragedy. It then chooses a new target and rinse and repeats the process like I do with these videos every week. Clearly, the creature needs someone in order to help it gain supplies, build a nest, and operate at its current location, and Jack has very much taken this position in Flint City. Jack seems crazy at the beginning of the episode, but pretty well balanced later on, and yeah, we're just gonna get into why this isn't really Jack. After Jessa's dreams, we did guess that when she was describing how the second time that the Outsider showed up, he was transforming into the cop due to his apparent better physique. Though we did bounce back and forth on this in the last video, as it was revealed that Maitland cut the bouncer at the strip club as well. Here we do know that there are 2 different versions of Jack, due to the length of his sideburns throughout the episode. At the beginning when he's going crazy, they're long, and then when we see him later, they're short, and it's a very nice minute detail to show the difference between the two. That doesn't mean that El Cuco isn't the bouncer or manager or whatever he works as, and clearly something is going on with him. We are yet to see how this plays out, but perhaps if Jack bolts, he will become the next one that the titular character uses. We also learn that not only can the Outsider manifest physically, but it can also take on an ethereal form and attack people spiritually. The real Jack is clearly becoming sick of the Outsider's demands, and he may decide to fight back similar to the man from the introduction. Aware that Anderson is hot on the trail, El Cuco did pass a message on through Jessa to back off the case, but this has fallen on deaf ears, and now we see the Outsider stalking Mrs. Anderson. Is it just me, or does he look like he's waiting to grab a microphone and say F her right in the pussy? Anyway, I digress. Anderson clearly hasn't backed off, and through Holly he's built up a pattern of how the character travels from town to town operating. After 5 weeks of waiting and theorizing, this episode really starts to pull everything together, and I finally feel like I can openly talk about what the plot is and how things may happen going forward. The Outsider visits Jeannie, and as in the case with Jessa, it appears at night and passes on a message about how Ralph will die if he doesn't drop the investigation. He threatens to kill her too, and we get way more into the side of the Outsider that he's a shadow that stalks his victims. This dreamlike trance that Jeannie was in makes her initially question whether it was real or not, but due to the cuts on her feet from standing on broken glass, we know that it was. She later tries to convince Ralph to drop it, but he refuses to. As we know, he only believes in things with rational explanations, and this is sort of a gift and a curse for the character as the investigation goes on. Jeannie draws a picture of the outsider after seeing his face, and this lines up with the boy from the last episode who also had a police sketch made. In Holly's world, she's at a bar, questioning the bartender about who the boogeyman was for her as a child. Like the ending of last week's episode, we learn that the outsider has existed for centuries, and our modern myths and legends have evolved from tales of it. The now aptly named tear drinker is theorized at hanging around at cemeteries due to the fact that families will often visit there and grieve. As we know, similar to Pennywise, the outsider feeds off a certain emotion, but where Pennywise feeds on fear, the outsider feeds on grief. They also operate both psychically in ways that align with one another. In the Stephen King book It, Pennywise was able to carry out so many child murders undetected because it used to almost hypnotically convince the adults in the town of Derry to be nonchalant towards missing children. There's a phenomenal chapter in the work that centers around the investigation of Adrian Mellon's death and how though witnesses saw the clown at the scene, they know this won't be believed in court and thus it's dropped from all proceedings. The outsider clearly works like this too, trying to intimidate those who are close to finding out what's going on into leaving the cases well alone. For me, it sort of works like a metaphor for how society and the police work in general. In recent years, we've heard several cases of child abuse carried out by celebrities and people in positions of power that were never really investigated properly by police because they were either corrupt or fearful for their lives and careers. Similar to the outsider, because of this, these predators were able to carry on like this for so long, and though I've had a couple of people ask why it's only now that the creature has even been close to being caught, this episode lets us know that that probably isn't the case, and like Anderson, the villain must have intimidated them into sweeping it under the rug. Holly visits the cemetery in which the Williams were buried, and we see what could have been its hideout during its time in the area. Holly comes across the man from the introduction that made Heath's bed and also wound up dead. He tells Holly about how the outsider screwed Heath and himself over. She also instructs Anderson to go to the cemetery where Terry is buried, and they realise that the barn is within walking distance, and we now know that this is where it resided. At Collins' baby shower, Anderson sees Jack and he goes off on one. This is actually the outsider, and as I mentioned earlier, we can tell that it is due to the length of his sideburns. He refuses to hold the baby, probably because it looks tasty, and he storms out of the party. That night, Collins has a dream that someone has come into her home and taken a baby, and it is possible that the outsider also didn't want to hold the child because he wants to frame Jack for its death should that happen. Dreams have haunted several characters throughout the season, however that doesn't mean that they're all bad. Anderson too has his own dream which offers a message of hope. As we know, if evil forces exist in the world, then good must too, and Anderson's visitor comes in the form of his son. He tells his father that he needs to let him go. As we know, El Cuco feeds on grief, and robbing the character of the Andersons' grief of their son will definitely starve it in some ways. In the book, the child was alive and was only away at camp, so I'm glad they changed it up for the show, as it makes a lot more sense here and ties in with the overall themes. It's one of the most touching moments of the season so far, and it reminds us that if there is evil, there is also good. El Cuco visits Anderson as Jack and apologizes about the party and asks to be granted access to the inside of the investigation. So yeah, once more, this isn't Jack being a nice guy, he's probably still in the woods screaming at trees. We then cut to the other outsider's accomplice and see how he ended up dead at the beginning of the episode. It turns out that he had a man held at gunpoint with an unloaded weapon and he just wanted to be murdered. We don't know all of the ins and outs of his psychology, but due to the bed making and his comments at the graveyard, he was clearly filled with regret over the entire incident and just didn't want to live anymore. Episode 5 closes with Anderson's vision of his son, and we cut to credits, knowing that Ralph won't be providing the creature with any more grief to feed upon. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and what you've thought of the season so far. Comment below and let me know, and if you enjoyed this video then please give it a thumbs up and make sure you check out our full breakdown of the season, which is going to be linked in the playlist at the end. If you want to watch a different breakdown then please check out our ending explain recap on the new Netflix season The Stranger. If you'd like to support the channel from as little as 99 cents a month, then please click the join button below. You get access to content early and can also suggest video topics and breakdowns. We massively appreciate it, and it goes a long way to helping videos like this get made. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at DefinitionYT or the Discord link in the description below. Every month we give away free movies to people who are subscribed to the channel, and this month you can win Dr. Sleep, and all you have to do is comment on a video and make sure you sub with notifications on. The more videos you comment on, the more you have a chance of winning, so make sure you get involved. The winner is going to be chosen at random on the 15th of February, so best of luck to everyone who takes part. This is a channel for people who are never missing television, so if that's the kind of thing you like, you need to subscribe to Definition. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this. You've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.